So last week, I made a video talking about my favorite tropes in YA, and today, I'm talking about my least favorite tropes. At least one of these is going to be an unpopular opinion, so I'm going to save that one for last. These are tropes that, as an author, I refuse to write. I don't like reading about them, I don't like writing about them, I don't like thinking about them, but apparently I like filming videos about them because here we are. Before we get into this list, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel talking about the actionable writing tips that helped me make my writing better. I also make the occasional video about tropes and fun things related to books and writing. So without further ado, let's get into the tropes. The first common young adult trope that makes me barf a little bit inside my mouth is Insta-love. Why do I hate it so much? Because it's unrealistic and it's boring. Insta-love immediately makes me lose all faith in the story. I don't believe that these two people have fallen in love instantaneously. I do understand that a lot of YA characters are teenagers, but it's different when you have a crush compared to when you fall madly in love with someone that you don't know very well. My one exception to this is when it's Insta-love, but then it's somehow discussed in the narrative and framed in a way where like the Insta-love is bad and that person wasn't actually in love with the person, but the idea of the person. But when it's two characters that just like fall madly in love and it's never questioned and their love just stays strong throughout the end of the book, I don't know, you lose me a little there. I want to see all the messy stuff that comes with falling in love. I want to see all of the doubts, all of the excitement, all of the initial like butterflies, and then all of the conflict. And falling in love is not necessarily a simple, easy thing. There are also really messy elements to it, and I think that honestly you're cheating the reader a little bit if you write an Insta-love plot. Because it's fun reading about people falling in love, and with Insta-love, you don't get that. My second least favorite trope in YA, and this is a big one, and also used often as a plot device, which I find super annoying, is lack of communication. I dare you to think of a plot, because there are many of them, that use lack of communication as a way to drive the plot forward. I hate it when I read a plot that couldn't have happened if the characters had just communicated a little better. If everything in the book can just be solved with a simple conversation, I'm gonna spend the entire book shouting at the characters to have a simple conversation. Now I hear you, maybe one character is too scared to talk about their feelings, and maybe they're scared that the other character is not gonna listen to them, but I'm sorry, I don't care. Even if characters have a tough time talking about their feelings, they can have a basic level of communication that avoids reader frustration on the level that you get when the characters just won't talk to each other. And honestly, it comes across a little lazy on the author's part when they couldn't think of a plot or a way to get what they wanted to have happen in the story to happen without relying on the fact that the characters will not speak to each other. My third least favorite trope, and this is not like a, ew, I just don't really like this trope. This is a vehement hatred for this trope, is glorified sexual abuse, or glorified abuse at all. Sexual assault for character growth purposes makes me want to vomit. Projectile vomit onto the authors, because that is not a good narrative to be portraying to a YA audience. I hate the emotionally abusive guy that the girl just keeps coming back to because she just feels this deep connection to him and just wants to give him a second chance. The misunderstood guy. He's not misunderstood, he's just a jerk. I hate it when authors portray toxic relationships as relationships to aspire to, especially in young adult fiction. When I was a teenager and reading a lot of young adult, I shaped a lot of my idea about relationships and interperson relationships based on the books that I was reading. And thankfully, I didn't read a ton of these toxic relationship books. But if I had, I think that that would have really, really messed me up in the head, and I really am so grateful that I didn't have to go through that. I'm not saying that I think I would never recover, I'm just saying that I think it's bad, and I think that we can do better as young adult authors to promote more healthy relationships in young adult fiction. My fourth least favorite young adult trope, and this one's more of like a dislike than like a vehement hatred, is the dead parents trope. Relationships with parents or guardians or parental figures are often really important in the lives of young adults. And so I think that it's cool to be able to explore that in young adult fiction. I really like playing around with the idea of the parents helping the young adults save the world and have them be a little bit more involved, because I think that that just makes the characters' lives fuller. It also just adds a whole layer to the adventure that they go on, which I think has a lot of potential for comedy. All right, fifth trope that I hate, evil for the sake of being evil. If you haven't noticed already from this video and my past videos, I really like character development. I love character growth. I love character-driven stories. I think even in thrillers and mysteries and action stories, you can still have a lot of good character moments and character growth. And I just love being able to connect to the characters, and I love stories where I'm able to connect to those characters. So it probably doesn't come as a surprise when I don't like stories where the villain is just evil for the sake of being evil for no apparent reason. I want that backstory. I want some reason for them to be evil. I want them to be able to justify what they're doing in their head, because that makes it so much more fun to read about. I like conflicts where instead of just saying good versus evil, have one character that wants one thing and another character who wants a different thing that's different from that, because both of them believe that they're doing the right thing, but those two right things clash. I think that's a lot more morally gray and interesting than the classic good and evil fight. So the whole evil for the sake of being evil villains don't really do it for me. The sixth trope that I absolutely hate is the female characters with no agency. The damsel in distress, the clumsy girl, the not like other girls, the doesn't have a personality main character and yet all of the boys are fawning all over me. I want to read about strong characters who are unique, who have their own specific intense likes and dislikes, who rise up to the occasion to save the day because they're the only ones who can. I don't like reading about female characters who can't make a single simple decision for themselves, not even about the person that they want to be with. I can't deal with it, no thank you. My seventh least favorite trope in YA are hot and steamy relationships right off the bat. I don't know about you, but my first experiences with relationships when I was a teenager were not hot and steamy right off the bat. There was a lot of stumbling, it was awkward, it wasn't like, romance novel, steam sesh with like shirtless man on the cover type vibes that a lot of young adult novels seem to be going for these days. And while I understand the appeal in that, like I understand that they want it to be kind of steamy and attractive, I think that it's a lot more fun to read about characters who are going through relationships and first relationships that are realistic and a little bit more fumbling at the beginning. I don't know, I think it's romantic to be realistic. The eighth trope that I find super annoying is the main character being amazing at everything on the first try. Like she practices for a little and then she can fight all the monsters. She's just a natural at singing and then can entice all the bad guys. I want to see main characters who have to really work to be halfway decent at some of these things. Like some of these things are hard. Just because you're not amazing at sword fighting doesn't mean that you don't have the potential to be a super cool, strong, tough female main character. A lot of these characters are like 15 and 16. Like let them suck at things. Like let them really try to have to figure out how to do things, or if they're really bad at something, work around them in a cool and clever way. Have them play to their strengths and have them maybe work as a team to be able to play to each other's strengths in order to solve something bigger. I'm definitely not amazing at everything on my first try. I'm not even amazing at things on like my fifth try. My ninth least favorite trope is the chosen one. The chosen one has been done a lot. And now, as I've mentioned before in this video, I prefer reading about characters who find themselves in this really terrible situation and have to rise to the occasion in order to get out of it. And they're not perfect, they're not the chosen ones, they're flawed, they, have things that they struggle with, but they're the ones that have to fix it, and so they need to be brave and courageous and stand up and fight. I prefer those kinds of stories than the chosen one stories, just because something feels a little bit more raw and real and dirty about them, which I find pretty cool. I don't know, my kind of YA books are more of the kind of rough around the edges, more dark and traumatic stories with characters who are very flawed and not perfect. And finally, the most controversial pick out of all of my least favorite YA tropes, I'm anticipating anyway, is that I absolutely, completely hate enemies to lovers. God, do I hate enemies to lovers. I think at the core, this goes back to the reason that I don't like glorified toxic relationships in YA. A lot of enemies to lovers relationships are toxic. I feel like people are definitely gonna fight me on this. I would probably fight me on this if this were a trope that I really loved. But I see on book talk videos and stuff, people always going nuts over those scenes where the guy presses the knife to the girl's throat and they're fighting and then he's make me, and then they make out, and it's all people are oh, if only I could have that. But I'm sorry, if somebody presses a knife to your throat in the middle of a fight, this is not a relationship I would want to be in. This is not a relationship that I think teenagers should aspire to be in. That's some pretty big red flag behavior. If people treat you unkindly and are really, really awful to you, then maybe this is a hot take, but maybe you shouldn't date them. That's why I prefer friends to lovers, and I prefer, like, you know, the fake relationship type stuff, even though I don't love fake relationships. So yeah, I really don't see the appeal. But if you like enemies to lovers, you can let me know down in the comment section what you believe the appeal to be, and I will listen to you, although I can't guarantee that I will agree with you. But there's also a difference between people not liking each other and then ultimately falling in love with each other. I'm talking about like the real hardcore enemies to lovers stuff where like this guy was out to try to kill her and was really toxic, and then she was really into that, and then they started like making out and stuff. Not like the we didn't like each other but now we do in a more like lighthearted way, because that's fine. That's normal, that happens. So that's it for my video on the 10 young adult tropes that I hate the most. I promise you can expect to never see any of these in any of the books I write. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Have a good week, everyone, and as always, happy writing.